Ladies and gentlemen, I have yet another cast over here for you. I mean, we've been going at this pretty strong now. We even got Mesk back to doing some solo casts, so you can expect some of those to roll out over the course of the next couple of days, and we'll see how long we can keep the daily cast over train rolling. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content so far. This time around, we're going to be seeing Neblime take on Benno. This map, Infinite Velocity, one of the larger ones that we have, but of course, there are Nidus Cesients linking the bases together, and some neutral structures that block the path, but burn down eventually. So around, I believe, the 2-minute mark is when we'll see those naturally expose themselves. Now, Neblime has been playing as Zerg, and he is harvesting from the farther than away gas. So if he wants to get the normal level of saturation or income, maybe slightly higher than the normal level, he would need to put a third worker on there, or he could just take this one. So showing a little bit of unfamiliarity with the map, perhaps. But, you know, it's not a map that you'll play too much outside of Ascension. And I don't actually think I've ever seen Neblime on this map during those Ascension matches. So, you know, that's kind of neither here nor there for now at the very least, but it's something to point out. And I will say, this is going to date the video, obviously, but this coming Saturday, we will have a For Fun tournament that's not going to have any season points on the line. And we'll see, you know, who wants to show up there and who wants to do some things. I will, of course, be taking a trip sometime soon in the next 9 days. So when we're thinking of that sort of thing, yeah, I'm not even going to be in the office, so to speak, to run tournaments or to cast them or whatever. So we figured instead of doing an Ascension-style tournament for that, we're just going to take it a little bit on the easier side, have a For Fun tournament, and see what comes from there. Now, Benno is banking a little bit of gas here as he gets his Cyprians out. Obviously, the quarry is 50 gas, and he is going to go ahead and station his first Cyprian over there just to scout out what's happening, but he does see the worker. The scout has come in. You get to hear the new weapon fire sound effect right there for the Droleth, because I was quite not happy, you could say, with the fact that when you're playing Zerg, there's like 3 or 4 units that use that spooghit.wav, which is the file name for the Hydralisk weapon fire. That's the Hydralisk, the Lakizalisk, and the Droleth all used it. So I ended up replacing the Lakizalisk weapon fire with something more unique, and then obviously the Droleth in the same way. So that is the situation we find ourselves for that. We might even get to hear it again as Neblime zones away the Scouting Mason. Now, there will be an expansion after Azorkaz. It's a bit of an unconventional opener. We don't really see that too often. You know, what I could imagine this is for is, in fact, a Lakizalisk, which is what we see. Because if Benno was going to be aggressive and come through the Nidus, because around now is when they're burned down, right? If Benno was going to do that, then that would be something to keep in mind. And then you have a Lakizalisk for defense. You know, you can hold this area, and then suddenly he needs a star pad to really break you, and that's assuming he can even get it across the map, you know, after he builds the ant seal. So it's interesting to think about it from those perspectives. Right now, Benno's just standing here, you know. He is actually paying attention occasionally, seeing what unit it is. When he sees a Lakizalisk, you know, he should feel a little bit on the safer side as far as being able to stay alive, right? It's not a Gorgor or anything. He doesn't have to grab any watchdogs or what have you. But his Mason will bravely attack the Lakizalisk 3 times, and that's 3. We also got to hear the Lakizalisk weapon fire sound 3 times. The second anchor with a star pad is coming up. He's not going to have it. Still no quarry for Benno, so he's going to start falling behind with workers when this Larvosk finishes, which is indeed what Neblime is going for, as well as, of course, this Hatterosk itself finishing up here. So we're going to start to see the Zerg stretch ahead in workers, and that's mostly because of the timing of the quarry. There is no, you know, treasury or anything. And, you know, one thing that is worth pointing out here, Benno's going to destroy the Nidus, but it's worth pointing out that low mobility units such as Cyprians can benefit from the Nidus in a way that's like kind of disproportionate, right? Because, like, you know, air units and what have you can stretch across the map a little bit easier. So having them show up here to wander on is, I think it's kind of interesting, right? It's an opportunity for, you know, some sort of counterplay or some sort of unorthodox usage of the Cyprian. Now, that being said, we do have an ant seal on the way. The anchors are now going to land over here. There could still be an air attack coming in or even a drop attack, but that Ovoleth is empty and a Hydrock Den is mutating. Looks like there will be some additional Kagrants mutated. That's just for the sake of spreading the Kagra over towards the ramp. Always a big fan of doing that as Zerg because it means that you can start stationing some defenses over there. And the ant seal will even reveal the burrowed Droleth. So that's going to indicate to Mr. Neblime that, yes, there are some anchors at the front gates, and there is indeed a quarry while the treasury is being set up in the back. So if there was a Lakizalisk in this, I don't think it would get too much work done. It might momentarily dissuade this treasury from being completed because the Mason might die. But other than that, you know, like, he also hasn't rescouted, only until recently did he actually do that with his Lakizalisks. He hadn't rescouted the Nida, so he didn't know that there was no impending threat from a Benno, you know, infantry army. And as a result of scouting that out, he's going to go ahead and confirm that, yes, there is a treasury on the way. Now, this Wraith is going to be on a pretty good intercept course here. That's assuming that Benno responds to it. He should have seen that, but he's lost track of it, I think. Yeah, just narrowly missed his opportunity to start attacking that Avaleth. Now, the Avaleth only has 1 armor, so the Wraith will deal some amount of damage to that, right? It is just 1 times 10 damage, even though it's 3 projectiles, because, well, not all of the attacks like actually match the reads or whatever. That's something that we should probably just go about fixing. I guess it's only 2 projectiles now, so it wouldn't be as bad for versus armor if we made it a 2 times 5, or maybe we'd give it a slight buff 2 times 6. But then versus unarmored targets becomes even more powerful. So you never know, man. You never know. But it's something to think about. You know, when you're thinking about something like the Avaleth, yeah, I think looking at it like that and saying, oh damn, it's got, you know, not that much armor, and it's very slow relative to the Wraith. I think the Wraith could have picked it off, right? You're just talking about 20 hits. It probably could have made 20 hits during that travel, and that would have been an opportunity to shut out the map in terms of vision. But Benno doesn't end up doing it. He will set up an anchor and a quarry in the back base, and so he's behind, economically speaking, by a considerable margin, as obviously Neblime has been allowed to worker up, you know, droll up. However, there is only 2 bases for the Zerg, and the Terrans can start to bump up their economic amount and their worker queues. You know, they've got 3 right now, and that is indeed 3. A very significant number, of course. And we've got some units headed over to the top right. The Cyprians will stand guard over the anchor. There's no, you know, secondary anseal. Like on a map like this where you do have access to the extra gas, you can choose just to tech, and that's exactly what Neblime is doing as he's banking up towards that 900 gas breakpoint. 450 minerals and 900 gas is what is required for the Zerg tech. So he's probably going to throw that down very soon as he can now afford it. You can see instantly sending the Droleth on the job, and he's going to go ahead and mutate the Iral Iris. I was actually thinking, you know, something that happens in Starcraft 2 when you're spectating or have replays is, I don't know how much of this is the default or how much of this is like the Observer add-on. Like there's like a Observer add-on or something that was circulating a while ago. But either way, some idle workers here for Benno. He definitely wants to fix that up. But either way, it's something to keep in mind is when you're seeing stuff like a tech structure go down, you know, having a sort of notification or something like a mini-map ping with a little bit of a notice that says, hey, you know, like so-and-so is building this structure. That could be interesting, right? You could even have like an advisor line saying like a player is teching up or something, you know, something like that. I feel like stuff like that could work. I know that StarCraft 2 does the mini-map ping when like transports are loaded up. I don't know that we would bother doing that. But maybe when transports are unloading, it could do that if you're not actively in the area at the time. So a 3rd base being taken as well by both of our players, but you know, obviously Neblime's is already up and running. Some workers being sent over there. 20 workers is the difference in favor of the Zerg. So Neblime's starting to get pretty scary. Has some units out on the map just to spy, you know, maybe alternate pathways that Benno might want to take. A lot of Cyprians, no surprises there, and just about has enough gas to start thinking about Tier 2. He's 100 away, and now 150 as he's queued up some more Cyprians. Looks like he's going to stay at this level for a little bit. And when the Zerg techs up before you, that can be pretty spooky. So really, this game has been fairly low action, right? There hasn't really been any set of attacks. I could see it actually ending in one fell swoop. With the Muthrok Spire happening, I imagine that there will be a lot of mutas on the way, since Neblime is a fan of that. But now that he has Tier 2 as well, another thing that he can do is start capping geysers, right? And Benno's a little bit far away from that. You know, he's closing in on the breakpoints for it as he gets his quarry at the 3rd base, but it's going to be a while before he actually gets his Tier 2 online, because it's not just building the structure, but it's also accessing the things after the fact. Not every race is like Protoss in Cosmonic Brood War, where instead of teching up in a uniform way where you're building a single structure to access the next whole set of tech, which I will point out that it took Benno quite a while to actually start. Something that you are in a situation for is, for Protoss, you basically piecemeal the tech tree together, and that allows you to essentially decide to specialize to have an army of mostly tier 1 stuff, but you can mix in like a tier 3 thing or something, if you're really spending that. He's capping all of his geysers at once, and Neblime, definitely just mining off of this geyser and a couple of the ridges is going to be out of gas production for a little bit, right? That does shut you down. And so it might have come at an awkward time, but he seems to have enough things banked up that he's able to get a whole host of Protathalors. That's going to be his unit of choice here as he starts to charge across the map. And it's not a bad choice versus the Cyprian, obviously. The fact that it has 10 range versus the 6 or 8 when the Cyprian is in the bunker, the anchor, that does mean that you get the benefit of being able to start sieging these positions. Now, they don't do great damage versus armored, but they do have 2 armor pen. So the anchor and the Cyprians, of course, are not going to reduce that damage. And the reason why I say they don't do great, by the way, is because they do have 3 attacks. So it's 3 times 5. That means that if you do have enough armor to contend with that, you will be in a position for your Protathalors to wreck face. Now, it's important for Neblime to keep the Izira cores alive, or some Hydras as he's starting to bring those in, because Protathalors can only attack ground units. So this is a spot where the Wraiths, and plus the Antseal, can definitely start coming in here and harassing these Protathalors. It might not be immediately obvious that this kind of unit can only attack ground, but that is indeed the case, right? So they're meant to be anti-ground artillery. And so air units like Wraiths can certainly come in and start doing raids. But right now, they're hogging the top half of the map. There are indeed a lot of Cyprians, but there's no engage here, right? It's only the Cyprians. We have some scrapyards and some fulcrums being made, but no other tech really available. And now there's just going to be some trades back and forth. No vestry here. And more scrapyards. It's scrapyards. I think maybe is this a mistake from Benno? That's the question. Because if he wanted to use tier 2, then he wouldn't have built the fulcrums if he was going to build a tier 1 add-on, right? The scrapyard gives you access to the Matador and the Blackjack, which can be useful, don't get me wrong. But in this particular situation, you would want Phalanxes to zone back the Protathalors and get the range bonus back in your favor. He's going to start repairing that anchor. Now, repair speeds have been reduced a little bit. You can see some of the Protathalors are very vulnerable, and the Cyprian hordes are having to step forward into uncomfortable territory in order to try to deal some damage, and it's really not working out too well here. The Masons are going to start getting tickled. Now, again, these Izira cores are important. They are the only things, plus these Hydras, that can actually attack the Wraiths, and they're starting to pick off and really do some damage towards those Protathalors. A lot of them did end up falling, and there's still maybe a little bit over half of them that are intact. And the Wraiths can be scrambled to start attacking again. Just whittling them down, picking a couple of them off here and there, occupying the time. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like something that's going to be happening, and the focus is on that anchor, so it will end up falling. Again, each one of these Protathalors dealing 15 damage a pop. You need a lot of Masons to repair that when the focus fire comes in. But be that as it may, there are indeed some Blackjacks. We have some Gorgons on the way. Those heavier air units are basically like souped-up Wraiths in terms of their power, so while they're not cloaked, they can certainly do certain things like, pick off some of Hydras and some Izira cores and stuff a little bit easier. But we're starting to get to the point where there's just not that much left, and in an unceremonious fashion, Benno is defeated. I still think he could have mounted a defense in his main. I'm actually really surprised that he gave up so quickly after, conceding his... Look at his money, right? He could have instantly thrown down a lot of Sentinels to keep this army back. Now, the Sentinel has the same amount of range as a Protathalor, but obviously he's going to withstand the attack a lot better, so that would be one of the options that Benno could have gone for. I am surprised that he ended up conceding and capitulating so quickly. He definitely was still in the game, I would say. But we do have a second match in our hands, so we'll jump into that and see whether Benno can equalize the score. And we turn to Death Spiral for our second game, Neblime against Benno. The customary GLHFs are exchanged. I'm actually not sure if either of these players have played on this map too much. It's definitely a map that has, I would say, less immediate safety. And I want to explain a little bit about maps anyway, since I have something to say in the early game, other than the sponsored sip. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, what the hell are you doing? Bottom right corner, hello. But the thing about Death Spiral, right, I've said this before, if you take this back base, which has more resources than the front base, it's a little bit further away. The path to it on the ground is a little bit more circuitous, and as a result, you're on a little bit of a harder position to defend. However, you're also taking up, you're giving up an opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive and forward-facing towards your opponent if you take the back base as opposed to the front base. And so keeping that in mind, it's definitely something to keep, as a player, you should know that that was sort of like part of the design of the game, right? Part of the design of the overall map. Now, that being said, there are a number of entry points into your base. Let me see if I can reveal the map without breaking stuff. So essentially we have this spot right here. This is the primary ramp in, and it is double wide. But the paths to this spot are through the natural. You come through here, this tiny choke. You come through here, this tiny choke. And so you can imagine that this is a much more defensible angle. If you were able to take this base, you could basically cut off rotations. You have this cliff to build defenses, to cut off paths down over in this direction, and then suddenly you can do a lot with that. Meanwhile, on the other side, it's a little bit more open, but it still terminates into a set of tiny chokes. So again, depending on where you set up your defenses or what bases you take, like, are you going to take this big-ass base that requires 2 town centers to fully optimize? You could. It could be a thing you do. But that would be another angle into your base. And of course, this one does lead into this ramp, which leads into this pathway. And it's the same on the other side, it's just I'm using a different tile for it, right? But it's the same in terms of the particulars. Now, let's see what happens if I close that. Okay, we didn't break the vision. Very nice. So that's a significant point. There is a back entrance, but it's much more circuitous. If it comes into play, I will talk about it. Maps in general in CMBW ended up being a little bit less on the safe side than maps in Brood War, I think. But also, it's just a more volatile game state at the start because, it was sped up a little bit in terms of your first military unit and your first, like the general econ and pace and stuff was much faster in the earlier stages, whereas now it's a little bit more stabilized. And also, people were learning things, so they were trying to figure stuff out. Now, interestingly enough, the Zork's into expansion opener is once again the choice for Neblime. Now, I don't know that it's as strong on a map like Death Spiral, where there is the opportunity to sort of flank all the way around this top right position, and also it's possible to just come through here. So you need a Lekizalisk on this ramp and a Lekizalisk on this ramp, and then I guess like a local one, or because it's really hard to actually hold this one. This is a much wider entrance in the back, but it's balanced by the fact that you have to go all the way around, right? So you would at the very least need 2 Lekizalisks to hold this one comfortably. But I am interested in this sort of style. I like the idea of being able to expand fast, to have a fast expansion and it not be like a super greedy build. So I think that's kind of interesting to think about. Unfortunately for Benno, he won't have much to think about anymore because his Mason has been impaled. Shriked. And indeed, this Lekizalisk is heading over in this direction to protect this base. Obviously, this ramp does exist. I was thinking about blocking this with a structure you could blow up or something. I don't know, maybe that could be something that would be healthier for the game in the early stages, because you can still approach the main ramp from 2 different angles. So it might be a good thing. It might behoove you to do that. Maybe just removing this ramp entirely wouldn't be a bad shout. I'm not really sure. It would make reinforcing this position a lot harder. So it's kind of a multifaceted angle. And there are corner bases as well. There's a base up here, and I think that's it as far as bases go. So, obviously the quad gas in the middle is kind of interesting. The Zoroaster push with the Avaleth is legendary. I'm very surprised to see what Neblime is up to here. He's just going to A-move into this base here with or into this general location with the Zoroaster. And there's an anchor, a couple of Cyprians, a Mason guarding, apparently. Interesting position there. Now, there was a star pad in response to the spot of the Lekizalisks, fairly stable playstyles from both players. You see the Lekizalisk, you need detection. You're going to go for either a Vestry with a Shaman or an Antseal, and the Antseal is more flexible. And the Vestry-Shaman combo is actually a little bit more gas expensive, I believe. They might be about the same. But the star pad gives you access to other things too, right? So, absolutely getting tickled, and that really Rokor is spinning. He's, I don't think he knows that it expires after a certain period of time, so that's a little bit silly. Neblime is going to go ahead and transfer more workers to his main. Now, the Lekizalisk is burrowed. If it was a little bit further down, it would have perfect vision of everything. I think even still, it probably will have vision of things coming down here. I don't think you can hug this, and that would be really gigabrain of Benno to even know anyway. So, yeah, I think instead it's just going to end up going to be just fine. Going to be just fine. Hydrock Den now in the cards here. Getting into that 5-minute mark, we're expecting a lot more infantry. We're expecting an expansion from Benno. But actually, expanding versus Benno specifically is a good move. He's very rarely aggressive. He doesn't have that, that bone in his body that tells him, hey, time to absolutely smash this guy. If he's going to work on that, that would be one thing to say is it's very easy to know, oh, I can expand and be safe versus a player like Benno. as his playstyle becomes more and more, I won't say obvious in a negative way, just like established, like people know about him. So that would be something that I would caution against if I was advising Benno, right? Is saying, hey, you know, maybe you should try to throw in a couple of early aggressive moves, like even just outright all-in-all cheeses, or something to that effect, because that actually does make you a more multifaceted player. Macro Hatch effectively going up over here, but it'll also get access to Neblime's micro gas base, you know, the minor bases here and there that I try to include. So that'll give him a very quick gas spike in terms of income. And he's slowly spreading the K-Grid down over here. Now, another thing you could do is build a macro hatch like right here or something if you wanted to spread the K-Grid more immediately. But obviously, this is totally fine, the slow spread, mutating in circuits and whatnot, if just as a general bit of coverage. It's a little bit awkward for Zerg, but it's still something that can be done. And I'm still waiting for people to just lift off K-Grunts with Ovoleths and place them wherever the fuck they want, because that is something that you can do, and he does have an Ovoleth. It's just guarding this back route from the ground. A Wraith was peering around over here and seeing what it can do. It did end up getting a single kill onto the Droleths, and will be zoned away. Now, if Benno had, like, force tasked onto it, he definitely could have gotten a second kill, but at that point, it's not very significant. And we do have a Trojan out, as well as a whole host of Hurricanes, so I think we know where this one is going, because we are going to see some Achman drops. The Masons will get tasked onto this natural, and that will be the start of saturating the second base. Again, behind in workers by 10, but able to get the expansions with a bit more tempo than he had on the first map. And, of course, he could theoretically start shutting the approach down with some infantry drops, so that's exactly what he's planning on doing. Now, if I'm Benno, and I do have knowledge of this area, where do I target? I think I just unload directly onto the Spraith, because the all of the units should survive that, and you can start toasting a lot of the Droleths. Now, this Ovoleth is going to confirm the location of this base, but it's not going to get too much else done. The Wraith is continuing to gather intel, but the Trojan is not yet left, and there is not a second one on the way. Might have spotted some of these military units, but definitely didn't spot them moving out, so there is going to be an attack here from Neblime. It's very interesting to see his composition be Iziracor Lakizalisk. I don't think I've seen this particular combo before. But yeah, there's not really that many defenses over here, right? He's still guarding his main ramp, probably because he's paranoid about this angle, and he's probably paranoid about that angle because it's just hard for him to immediately see what's going on. Now, the Lakizalisks are in range to start attacking the anchor, and some more infantry are trying to come in over here. But this is a very, the NCL actually got zoned away by those Iziracors. That's pretty awkward because now the Lakizalisks cannot be targeted. They come back in. Certainly attempts here to hold, but I'm not actually sure that he's got enough infantry units. He still hasn't lifted these anchors to try to protect. The Iziracors obviously do block the Cyprian shots now, but in that particular case, there was just a few too many. And there will indeed be a retaliation here. Now, the Lakizalisk has more range than the Cyprian, so this has to be done with a bit of care. He's going to go ahead and tank some shots with the Masons, but he's not really moving his units outside of that. So if you don't, use, say, anchors to cover the Cyprians, at that point they do have more range than the Lakizalisk, but they can also just be, kept alive. That does make it a lot harder to contend with something like this. And even here, if he lands in that position, I think 3 Lakizalisks is going to be enough to deal some damage to him. But he's starting to move some units around. He does indeed have that borrowed Iziracor. And there's nothing in this back anchor, so this is mostly for zoning. Oh, one of the Lakizalisks does go down, but it gets a pretty juicy hit off, killing 3 infantry units. And there's some more units that are being tickled to death, with more of these Cyprians going to be falling. Yes, okay, all the anchors survive, but this has shut down the economy for so long. Back at base, Neblime has tier 2 active. He doesn't have any structures that are benefiting from it just yet, and there's a drop here, but it wasn't ever unloaded. Does Benno even know? Now, remember, from his perspective, he just sees a single bit of revealed over here, and it doesn't even look like there's anything in response. I don't think Neblime has seen it, so now he's going to realize, oh shit, I had this drop, but it's just as some Iziracors are popping, and the Hurricanes have not been microed. So they're just going to walk directly in to start dealing with the circuit, sure, but at the same time, are you really going to be able to do too much? I mean, there's a Lakizalisk out, you've killed maybe 1 worker, that's it? Like, this could have been so much better, but unfortunately for Benno, he was not able to equalize. He had to have, like, the most mammoth sort of drop in terms of worker kills, because he's down by 40. He would have had to wipe that whole base, and still he would have been down in workers. So, starting to take this base over here, that's the double one, remember? So Going to be a lot of value out of something like that. And he is starting to... Okay, Benno did catch that his treasury was on fire and burning. The Atlas is on the way, so some money banked. I mean, 1,200 minerals, by the way. That's something that you definitely could have added more stockades for. Now waiting for gas for fulcrums instead. I still think you need to add stockades, add anchors, some watchdogs even, maybe, for good measure. You don't know what's coming, but there is a Gorgoril swamp, and that does mean that we're most likely going to be seeing Bactylisks this time around. Could even be Tethzoricors. I mean, not a bad choice overall, but something that I don't think is going to be used too often just yet. Anchors starting to be repaired as well. The treasury on below half HP can be focused down so very easily. Second Fulcrum on the way. That's all that Benno feels super comfortable doing. And yeah, this is a rough situation to be in for Benno. You know, like what really do you plan on doing in such a spot? The distance mining, of course, just setting up the worker saturation in that base. He's taking a 5th base at this point, if you count the, gas only over here, which he's only mining from the geyser. I think he's realized that, and he's starting to saturate it over there. Get some basic defenses at each base. That's not a bad move. Just enough to slow your roll, slow your opponent's roll, and of course they can overwhelm you, but you can, get some map info. You can scout them. Some Bactylisks are being mutated. Eventually, they will have a custom graphic, too. We love those. We love custom graphics for Cosmonic Brood War. In fact, I actually just said to DF that it would be great to have a custom quarry. So maybe we'll see something like that sometime soon. Sentinels on the high ground. Not a bad shout whatsoever. He probably needs, I want to say, like 3 or 4 minimum. But even still, I think, if an air unit walks over here, they will see this. And in fact, I can't tell if... No, he's just moving out in general. So at this point, there's no Palladiums out. The Fulcrums cannot make Phalanxes. There's no anchors here. A single Bactylisk is being pathed over here, which I'm not a super big fan of, but hey, it outranges the... Yeah, there's too many units too close, and not enough Sentinels, not any down here on the low ground, so... instantaneously turned on as soon as it shoots. It still manages to get one, so there is that. But yeah, the Bactylisks are not going to be dealt with by the small arms fire of the Mavericks and the Cyprians. It's just not going to happen. So there's just so many of them. They do outrange the anchors. At this point, he has so many forces. The bounces are going to kill off all the Masons. I don't know. There's no Palladiums. They're just now finishing. What can Benno do in such a situation? This looks like a much worse position than he was in the previous match. And yeah, indeed, GG is called. And we have Neblime taking it 2-0, both matches. Benno likes to play best of 3s, so the only unfortunate part is for me, if I see only 2 games, I figure whoever won the first game probably also won the second game, because otherwise there'd be a set of 3, right? But anyhow, despite not making it to 3, I think Benno's getting a little bit more reps versus Zerg. Not too many people play Zerg. It's like the Shambler, 3-Crow, and now Neblime is starting to play Zerg again, and of course Alexander does play it as well. So it's interesting in that front. I'm interested in seeing where that goes. I think Mystery Meat does play it as well, but he usually plays Terran, obviously, for the tournaments. So who knows what's going to happen, right? He played Protoss in a recent castover. What could come next? But anyway, enough about the players. If you want to join the list of players that I rattle off sometimes in the middle of videos, well, join the Discord server and start playing. And otherwise, if you enjoy this content, obviously bottom right is where you need to go. And beyond that, all I have to say for you is get good. You know what I'm saying? Get better. Get Bennoer. And I'll see you guys next time.